Chapter 18, October 7th. Noor found Fadi hiding in the darkened bathroom behind the shower curtain. He sat in the tub cradling his broken camera in his arms. She flipped on the lights and leaned over the side of the tub. Her eyes widened, seeing his puffy face, but it was the blotches of blood splattered on the front of his t-shirt that made her scream. Within seconds, their parents burst into the cramped orange-tiled room. "Oh, Allah, have mercy!" cried Zafuna. She pushed past Noor and knelt next to the bathtub. Habib followed closely behind. Zafuna and Noor pulled Fadi up out of the tub and settled him on the toilet. "What happened?" asked Habib. Still in shock, Fadi barely felt the pain as his mother grabbed his face and turned it toward the light. "A couple of guys jumped me as I was leaving the school," he said. "If I get my hands on those boys," growled Zafuna, her eyes lit with fire. Then her face softened as she kissed Fadi on the tip of his nose. Habib's lips tightened as he rifled through the medicine cabinet. He took out a dark bottle of peroxide and bandages and placed them on the counter. Fadi looked up at Habib with teary eyes. He held out the camera, his hands shaking. "They broke it, Father. They broke it." Habib took the camera and knelt down. "Don't worry about it, Jean. The most important thing is you weren't seriously hurt." Noor's eyes narrowed. "Did they try and rob you?" Fadi blinked. "No," he mumbled. "Did they call you names?" pushed Noor. "Yes," said Fadi. "They said I was a terrorist." Silence descended in the cramped room. "Fighting is not the answer, Fadi Jean," his father said. "It never solves the problem." Zafuna shook her head in anger and stood up. She took cotton balls out of the jar next to the sink and grabbed the bottle of peroxide. "I know, Dad," said Fadi. A flare of anger went through him. Ike and Felix had attacked him, and he hadn't done anything to provoke them. He wanted them to suffer like he was suffering. "Who were they?" asked his mother. She dabbed at his face with a cotton ball soaked in peroxide. Fadi winced at the stinging. "I don't know who they were," he said. "I can't tell them. Dad's going to drag me to school and my name will be mud forever for ratting them out. Then I'll really get it." "Are you sure?" asked Noor. "Have you seen them around in school?" "It's an awfully big school," mumbled Fadi. "I've never seen them before." As the three of them fussed over him, Fadi's thoughts shifted to the competition. How was he going to enter without a camera? There were only 6 days to submit the winning shot. "Your face still looks awful," whispered Noor. She sat next to Fadi in the back seat of the car as Habib drove down Thornton Avenue. "I should have put some concealer on it." "No way," grumbled Fadi. "You're not coming anywhere near me with makeup." He gingerly touched his swollen lip and let out a pent-up breath. It was their parents' wedding anniversary, and for once Habib didn't have to drag Zafuna out of bed so that they could go out for dinner. It was as if his getting beaten up was the medicine his mother needed to shake off the blanket of sorrow that had been suffocating her. Fadi was glad to see her coming out of her funk, but he was in no mood to celebrate. It had been 2 days since he'd returned home from the fight at school, 48 hours since his camera had been smashed to pieces, 2,888 minutes since the moment his chance to win the competition had evaporated. 172,888 seconds since he'd failed Mariam, yet again. There's no denying it, I'm a complete loser with no honour. Anger burned through him and he hungered for Badal. He didn't care what his father said. Ike and Felix had taken something precious from him, and he wanted revenge. Habib pulled the taxi next to a restaurant called Khyber Pass. It turned out the restaurant's owner, Gul Khan, was one of Habib's classmates from Kabul University, where Khan had studied biochemistry. They'd run into each other at Friday prayers and become reacquainted. Gul Khan had come to California years before and opened the tiny family-run restaurant off Peralta Boulevard in Little Kabul. As Fadi followed his family inside, they were greeted by a short, smiling man with a curved moustache. He bounded forward and gave Habib a crushing hug. This must be Gul Khan, thought Fadi. He peered around the cosy space covered with red and black carpets and paintings of the Afghan countryside. Traditional music played softly from the stereo in the back. "Salam alaikum, brother Habib, sister Zafuna," cried Gul Khan. "Welcome to my humble restaurant, and these must be your beautiful children." Fadi ducked his head and mumbled his salams. Gul Khan seated them at one of the 6 tables in the practically empty restaurant. The only other customers were an American couple, reviewing the laminated menu through bifocals. "Business has been slow," Gul Khan sighed. "You know." They all nodded. They knew. "At least my store is secure," added Gul Khan under his breath. "A few stores down from me there's a carpet shop owned by a Pakistani man. It was vandalized the other night, the windows broken, awful things written in spray paint." "These are difficult times, brother Gul," Zafuna sighed. "We must be strong and vigilant." "You are right, sister, you are right," responded Gul as he handed them menus. Fadi was happy to see that there was a sparkle in his mother's eyes tonight. She had made the effort to do her hair and put on some lipstick with Noor's urging. Gul Khan's wife was in the kitchen, which could be seen from the dining area through a long rectangular window. She stood over bubbling pots stirring. When she saw them look in, she hurried out to greet them. "My wife makes the best mantu in town," Gul Khan beamed as his wife blushed. "Then we will definitely have it," said Habib. As the family settled down, Gul Khan's teenage son brought a starter salad to their table, along with glasses of dor, a yogurt drink filled with chopped cucumbers and mint. "Smells wonderful," Habib sniffed in appreciation. "Yes, it does," said Zafuna with a rare smile. Gul Khan came by to collect their orders, and within minutes their table was overflowing with hot, fragrant food. Fadi avoided the plate of mantu and chewed on a piece of tender grilled chicken, watching the American couple awkwardly dunk bread into their eggplant dip. "How is everything?" asked Gul Khan as he came around to refill their water half an hour later. "Delicious, brother Gul," said Zafuna. Her cheeks were pink, and she'd eaten most of the food on her plate. Gul smiled with pride and paused when the phone rang. "One moment, please," he said, and he hurried over to pick it up. He stood quietly listening to the caller at the other end. As the seconds passed, he grew agitated. "Oh, Allah have mercy," he whispered. His eyes darted back toward the kitchen. He hung up the phone and reached over to the stereo. He switched off the tape and adjusted the knobs on the radio. Soon an English-accented voice of a BBC reporter filtered through the room. "Brother Habib," said Gul Khan in a hushed voice. He hurried over and stood at their table, twiddling his fingers. "Listen to what is happening." Fadi put down his fork, and his ears perked up to the details spilling from the commentator's lips. Tomahawk cruise missiles were launched from both US and British ships this evening, signalling the start of Operation Enduring Freedom. This was accompanied by a mix of strikes from the land-based B-1 Lancer, B-2 Spirit and B-52 Stratofortress bombers. The initial military objective, as articulated by President George W. Bush, is to destroy terrorist training camps and infrastructure within Afghanistan, the capture of al-Qaeda leaders, and the cessation of terrorist activities. Fadi hunched over his plate as his appetite evaporated. He watched his parents' faces pale as they imagined the falling bombs. Were they bombing Jalalabad? What about Mariam?